Now we'll have the second panel, which is on impact of users on the digital transition or transformation. Let me introduce the panelists, and I would like to invite them to the floor. Rahasn Gulsan from Berkman Internet Society Center. He is executive board member. He is also a writer. He has many works in the area of internet and technology. And we have Rahasn Gulsan. I'm sure you know Rahasn. She is a columnist in Habertürk Daily. And I'd like to invite Basak Purut. She represents Ekşi Sözlük. She is the fighter when it comes to the legal affairs of Ekşi Sözlük, and she's going to talk about her experiences in Ekşi Sözlük. And I'd like to invite, finally, Ozgur Akpinar from the Information and Communication Technologies Authority, and he's the head of Consumer Rights Department. Can I move you here? If we are to define internet as a device of pure technology, we also have to define its phases. We used to have dial-up connections. Now is the time of fiber optical connections. We were connecting with 128 BBS. Now we're connecting in megabytes. But in addition to this technological definition, we also have some other types of definitions for internet, like social definitions. We had the period of portals. Now we are in the 2.0 era, in which the user also provides some content. Before we start with the discussion, I'd like to provide you with some background information. We're going to watch a video about the perception of people on the street. Who should have control?
Gerçekten zararlı yazılımlar olsun, zararlı kullanıcılar açısından zararlı şeyler olabiliyor.
Yani devlet kontrol ederse bu kapsam birazcık daralacağı için insanlar her ihtiyacı olan şeyi bulamayacak diye düşünüyorum.
Koskoca adam olmuş. Yani bıraksın kendi iradesini kullansın yani. İstiyorsa seyretmek, seyredebilir kendisi.
Güncel sitelerde bile bir video paylaşımında izlerken bile önde 20 saniyelik reklam, bu tüketici haklarına bence aykırı. Ben onu görmek istemiyorum. Bunların kontrol ve düzen edilmesi şüphesiz bir gerçek yani.
İnternet güvenliğini çok destekliyorum açıkçası. Biraz özgürlüğü kısıtlamak gibi oluyor ama her şeyde özgürlük iyi değildir yani. Benim şeyim bu.
Kontrol altında olmalı. Yani tam olarak emanet etmezdim ama hani emanet etmek zorunda olsaydım da ederdim.
Bence hiç gereği yok kontrol etmenin. Hani küçük çocuklar da giriyorsa ebeveynleri kontrol edebilir. Yani herhangi bir sansür uygulamaya, kısıtlamaya bence hiçbir anlamsız.
Evet, çadırımızın altında
bir soru var. Yine önce olduğu gibi. Just like in the morning session, we have another question on the screen. Who holds the future of the content in internet? Is it the technology companies or users? Who will control or define or shape the content in the future? As a technology companies or users? You can use your devices. So let's start with this question. Let's start with Basak Purut, because he is the part of a website which produced 2.0 services when we had internet at the level of 1.0. In fact, if we say content is the king, if we take content as the focal point of everything, then we can claim that users will shape the future. But the users are still not aware of what they really need. Every day we have new needs. Just a couple of years ago, we were never using Instagram, but today billions of photos are shared through Instagram. So the users are still limited with the capacity provided by internet. Let's talk about Ekşi Sözlük. Ekşi Sözlük is a one-of-a-kind example when it was first released, and then it became popular. And of course, other models were created after Ekşi Sözlük. So, users cater for the content, and the content also divert the users. What do we mean by content produced by the user? We have different types of that. Ekşi Sözlük is a website where the users provide the content, but Facebook is a similar website. But there are differences. In fact, there is no difference between them. The website decides what kind of content it wants to accommodate for, and the users define how to use that content. Facebook, for instance, is also a video sharing website, but maybe it was defined by the users. It was the users who decided to share videos on Facebook. Just like I said earlier, there is a mutual balance, equilibrium, and both sides of the equilibrium feed one another. I cannot think of the sides of the equilibrium independent of one another. So, Rahasn, how should we define freedom when we're producing content for the websites? I have to answer this question based on my own experiences. I have a different opinion than my colleague. We loved producing content. In 1980s, people used to cite Andy Warhol and his 20-second or 15-second quotation. Now, there's the word of content in our mouths. We upload lots of pictures to Facebook, and without our pictures, without our photos, Facebook will not have a content, or Instagram will not have a content. So maybe for the first time in our lives, we have encountered with platforms like Facebook and Twitter, in which or where we can share our opinions freely. But that's an excessive freedom environment, because every day I wake up and the first question that comes to my mind is whether the government or some censorship organizations put some bans on me. So there should be certain self-control as well. But of course, having such freedom radically changed our lives. Because Twitter, Facebook, and other types of websites where people produce their own ideas and share their own ideas give us the opportunity to use those ideas. Therefore, they are very delicate. So we should be very careful when it comes to freedom. Before lunch, we were talking about freedom on internet. We were talking about freedom on internet in the morning session, and we talked about how we feel uncomfortable when it's limited. But we also see that freedom can harm other individuals. So how should we supervise or audit this freedom, and how should we regulate the relationship between the individuals using or sharing the same content? What do you think of that?
Thanks for this excellent question. Let me take 2 steps back, because before we rush into the question, what is an appropriate governance regime, or what kind of laws do we need to have? I think it's always helpful to first take a look at the phenomenon as such and try to understand what is actually currently happening. And this panel is on user-created content, and I think one of the things where we have data points is that user-created content is really a key driver of many of the popular platforms that we've mentioned. Many more could be added, including Wikipedia, for instance. No one has mentioned that in that series. And second, it's not only a huge trend and an explosion of user-created content. Second question then is, how do we think about this trend, and how do we evaluate it against the norm sets we share, but also about against the backdrop of norms that are local to a country or a particular community. Now, overall, I would argue there is a rough consensus that actually user-created content, and much of we see under this umbrella term Web 2.0, is a good thing from a societal perspective. Why is it a good thing? First of all, you see user-created content playing a huge role in innovation and economic growth. You mentioned Facebook would not have content without user-created content. YouTube wouldn't be the same platform without users driving the platform and filling it with content. Wikipedia, Flickr, and many more services of this sort can be added, where new business models also emerge around these services and around that kind of content production mode that is new and enabled through digital technologies. But it's not only about economic growth, and it's not only about new services and innovative business models and the like. It's also about diversity. We are currently living in a much more diverse information ecosystem than ever before, and we've heard from the previous panel some of the huge benefits in being able to share information, to look up information, to compare information, and really make your own opinion based on the things you can gather ourselves. And just to mention another benefit, looking at user-created content from this normative perspective, is education. We also heard that in the morning. The minister showed some of the important initiatives here, like Fatih and others in Turkey, that are early initiatives, very important initiatives that indicate that online will play an increasingly important role in the education of young people. And in fact, at Berkman and elsewhere, we're doing research asking kids, how do you learn and how do you do research and access information? And of course, they don't go first to the library, they go first to Google and Wikipedia. YouTube plays an increasingly important role, for instance, in the dissemination of news. So what I'm trying to say, in this second step, once we understand the phenomenon and the trends, we can ask what are the values that are at stake, broadly speaking, that then may also give us a better answer. How do we regulate, and how much freedom and what kind of controls do we need to have in place? Now, my assessment would suggest we want to think very carefully about governmental intervention. I'm not saying we don't need any, but I think we need to be careful about it, because the benefits are huge. And admittedly, there are problems, we are all aware, from cyberbullying and safety and privacy challenges to copyright infringement. All these challenges need to be addressed. But without, I think, losing this extremely wonderful opportunity that we have given these new technologies.
Hayatın geri kalanında
So consumers, we are internet users, and in the rest of life we are consumers. So how is the fact of being consumers reflected in reality and on internet, and what's it for? You had a question on the screen. I'd like to answer that question to answer your question as well. When you look at the most profitable companies in the world, they are generally content-providing companies like YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, etc. So these content-providing companies, of course, the content is provided by users, but the companies make profits by using the content provided by their users. But of course, they also require an internet infrastructure. If we didn't have the internet infrastructure in Turkey, no we wouldn't have any content providing websites or companies. So first, you have to have the technological background. We had XDSL back then. They had 6-7 million subscribers. Then we had 3G, and in 1 year, the number of subscribers went up to 14 million. So with mobile services, content provision also became very widespread in Turkey. And now we have social media in our lives. And maybe social media is having its best time in Turkey. But of course, it won't stop. As internet continues to develop, as infrastructures continue to develop, as we can have high-speed access and high-speed data download possibilities, then people will share more information. And they would want everyone to see the content they provided. So, when it comes to your question, where can we find the user in this big picture? The user is everywhere because everything is developed based on the needs of the users or consumers. Facebook used to be a small company. Now it's one of the most valuable companies in the world. Same goes for Twitter. So, user preferences define the services, but of course first you need infrastructure.
When announcing you, I said you're the fighter of Ekşi Sözlük because Ekşi Sözlük brought innovation, a new format, and in quote unquote, it had an aggressive style, and many court cases emerged, and there's still ongoing court cases. So the format is as follows: people within certain limitations, they can write anything they want. This is other than the editorial framework of this dictionary Ekşi Sözlük. The limits are very wide, and some people are disturbed by it. And what did you learn from your pivotal role in this field? In Turkey, for the sake of freedom of expression, we did the first things on the internet online. This is why we drew a lot of reaction, and we have to check for the following. Ekşi Sözlük. So 96, 98. We were established in 98. Post 1980, there was a closed society, and they realized that they could meet other people via the internet, and this is happened via Ekşi Sözlük in Turkey. So we transited from a closed society to a semi-closed society via the website, via our website, because there weren't any equivalent websites, and this happened over Ekşi Sözlük. So what made Ekşi Sözlük that popular and a center of hatred for some people? Sedat Kapanoğlu. It was Sedat Kapanoğlu's choice. I mean, people can say something that I don't like on my website, and they may disturb other people with their ideas within legal norms. So we have to stop and think. Are we tolerant as a society? At what point do we get angry? And in terms of we'll lag behind in this regard. I mean, morals, ethics, etc. People in Turkey, they speak words, don't act a lot. Words are more important than action. So we are trying to publish everything unless it contradicts with the law. So since 2000 and 2003, 2004, we had legal problems, our first legal problems. We didn't change our opinion and our attitude. There are 40 court cases, ongoing court cases against us at any time. So we lost just one case, and this many legal matters, they are decided in favor of our company. In fact, which would prove what I say, the society that we live in, we should adapt to the society that we live in, and there are tensions in a way in that society which we need to debate. Ekşi Sözlük is not something which is managed at the top. That it's not an environment which is directed, managed by someone. Everyone enters this domain, and they can write anything they want to. At this point, I would like to turn to the audience and ask whether or not there are questions. Please feel free to ask any question, or please prepare any questions if you haven't prepared your questions in your mind. Yes, please. Microphone, please. Thank you very much, Ferhan Odabaşı. I am from Anadolu University. As regards Ekşi Sözlük, who is complaining? The content creators, or who is complaining? Outsiders that are non-creators of content. Can you give some statistics about who complain about Ekşi Sözlük? There are certain formats, content which fits the format or not. There are complaints regarding that. And then there are complaints regarding contradiction against the law. There are outsiders, individual complaints. But as regards insiders, what kind of complaints do you have against each other in terms of, against content creators? I mean, these are simple complaints maybe. Authors, writers, they can argue with each other, and they want us to intervene sometimes. This is a tradition coming from the 1990s. And then as regards social values, there may be some issues which written to draw attention, and people follow the content, and they see what is written, and we intervene before it is published. I think there's a problem with the microphone. Could you improve or solve this problem, please? Yes, any other questions? Hello, my name is Murat Gülbaran. I have a question to Rahasn. For Rahasn, one of the duties of the press is to inform the public, raise awareness of the public. This was an issue discussed in the first panel. Development of infrastructure is very important, you said. But when talking about development of infrastructures, I mean, be it base stations, wireless internet connections, and other elements of infrastructure, they may harm our health. Or this is a debate, at least in public opinion. Many doctors, research institutes say it's harmful for human health. So, to what extent do you pay attention to this aspect? On my own behalf, I mean, citizens, the role of the media and its detrimental effects is an issue that I want to discuss around, not about the harmful effects of infrastructure. I am not knowledgeable on the subject, but I can reformulate the question maybe. Or a follow-up to your question. There's a citizenship journalism. People, they write about things that they see, experience. So users are creating content and act as journalists in a way, or reporters. And so this is, I mean, what people can do. I have a question. Let me ask you in that way. Is journalism changing in a way, or everything will become digital? There won't be any newspapers. The profession of journalism will change, won't it? Yes, everyone was afraid because we earn money and we from journalism. I want to have a white goods shop, open the shop in the morning, wait there until evening and sell goods. I don't have that opportunity. In the beginning, we were afraid we'll lose our jobs. But then we saw that won't be the case. Journalism methodologies radically change, yes. and Citizens Report News, and these are competitors, and the principles of the profession won't change. So having knowledge and education makes a difference. But where are we headed to? iPad magazine, the daily and half iPad edition of the Huntington Post can be given an example. The daily has cut its workforce. 1/3 of the workforce works there, and Huntington Post is free of charge on the iPad. So we saw that economically speaking, it's not viable, and crowds' attention is not towards this type of media, but in the social media and in these networks, we see reports of individuals which challenge us, and this motivates us to work harder. But in terms of there are differences of interpretation, perspective, and ethical values are very important here, because these are platforms open to manipulation. There may be discourse includes racism, discrimination, etc. 29th of October, you may remember, there was a policeman chasing a child carrying the Turkish flag. So thousands of people shared this photo, and then we found out that it was a Photoshop incident. And then the press may be old-fashioned, according to you, but some ethical rules of the profession will still be protected in the future, will be kept up. The users, when they create content online, they are satisfying themselves in a way, and they also contribute to the growth of commercial enterprises, and they don't get their share, profit from it. So.
Well, that's largely unresolved. I mean, the legal answer is it depends on the terms of services and the legal arrangements that the platforms provide and the users are accepting when using the platform. But the legal answer is not so interesting, I would argue. I think it's much more interesting to look at the different business models that emerge, how actually companies start to understand that if you run a user-created business, you want to be more sophisticated about who owns what and who has the rights to do what with the content. So we see a lot of experimentation. I think we haven't seen one single model that succeeds or prevails all the different types of content. If you look at online games and virtual worlds, for instance, there was an initial idea that the virtual world provider would own the content created by its users, but users didn't accept that. They didn't like this idea that the avatar that represents you somehow is owned by the company and not by you. And so there's also a learning process on the side of the companies going on, how to deal with this tricky question actually of intellectual property.
Fikri mülkiyet hakları önemli.
Buradaki içerikten ve bunu sağladığı gelirden bir pay almak,
getting money for creating content. I mean, 3.0 will have a new era where the users will get money for what they create.
Yeah, I mean, why not? Why not? I wouldn't necessarily push it to say they get revenues out of it, but they get a lot of free services out of it, right? If you look at Facebook and the social life it enables and the friendships and the great things Facebook lets you do, that's also kind of a value, right, in return for what you as a user provide to Facebook. And the same is true for Google, for Gmail, for many other services. Now, interesting question down the road, if you look at some models in South Korea, for instance, Oh My News, for instance, as a case study where citizen journalists suddenly got a certain share of advertisement revenues if their story was voted up and became popular. So again, yes, absolutely, that may be part of this ecosystem that users get their share out of the revenues created. But the point is, I believe we will see a diverse mixture of models in the future, and not kind of one single way how to monetize user-created content and one single way how users can benefit as well, but rather, different models that depend on the context which one prevails.
Soru var mı acaba?
Are there any questions? Yes, please. Hello, Doğuş Yıldırım is my name. Actually, a model was tried before, but it didn't work. They have a different motivation, the users, when creating their content, I think. I have a question. We watched a video. A person said, I don't want to see this advertisement. Is this person right? Or do we have to provide the content free of charge at all times? What your addressee? You're my addressee, and then maybe there's a research on that. Mr. Ozgur, I don't know. I mean, when watching the video, they don't want to see any commercial advertisement or something. But when we look at the advertising company, this company has incurred costs to be able to have this advertisement published or broadcast. So the length of ad is important. Depending on the reaction of the user, the company who wants to add an ad, to put an ad in, they have the opportunity to determine the time of the ad, the duration, content, etc. So this debate will go on, I think, but the market will balance it out depending on the reaction of the citizens. Before Urs, maybe I can address the question to Basak Purut. Ekşi Sözlük gets ads on its main website and main page, and there were debates because of the ads. Because the user content is being sold in a way. So how did you resolve this matter, and what about in terms of disbursement of the finances and then ads in their content suddenly appearing in front of them? PD Network was a good example, super example. We tried this example in Turkey. Everyone got their share. And it was measured by the amount of the content they created. The system collapsed. In order to earn money, they put in more characters, and that was all they did. And it was garbage and inflated. And it was also mentioned it. People, when uploading content, creating content, they have an expectation and different motivation. When you put your picture of uncle on Facebook, you don't calculate that Facebook earns millions of dollars from it. So you want to show the picture of your uncle to your mother. It's a win-win. Facebook has the ad, you create your content, you put in some pictures. So Ekşi Sözlük is a law in the pyramids, actually. Ekşi Sözlük users, we don't know their private lives, we don't have any personal data on them, we don't know if their relatives share something or write something. So Facebook is high up in the pyramid in terms of sharing content. So we have people who write something for Ekşi Sözlük. They see that they can become more popular, even more popular than any columnists in newspapers when they write about something on the agenda. So we leave the interaction to them. We don't moderate anyone, but I have to go on. Okay, I would like to intervene. Conventional media has young people working for low amounts of money in a way, and for not so much money. Yes, I mean, It's not that we recruit people and we don't pay the insurance premium, and then we fire them once their work is finished. They come to us, write what they want, and they can delete the content at any time. They can publish their content somewhere else. There are no copyrights attached to what they write, and so in terms of content, you can't compare it against each other. I mean, they're different worlds. And okay, Rahasn, you have the floor now. What do you think? These debates are very important and quite invaluable because anyone is trying to contribute ideas. The owner of Google, the owner of Facebook, they are not becoming billionaires and going to talk shows, etc. In the short term, if you have a good idea, internet gives you the money. There are angels, investors, etc. But if you don't have any bright ideas, if you think the same as thousands of other people, you can write them, you can share these ideas with anyone, satisfy yourself. You have this opportunity. But if you have any plans, or of course you can earn money from it, but we consumers don't want to see these ads, but the websites deem it necessary. And if we want to be free and express anything we want to, and then complain about people that are famous, and then we have to make do with these ads. Everything has a price. I mean, they have 40 court cases. I mean, it's money. Everything has a reason. Nothing happens without a reason. And the money comes for the court cases comes from the ad money, maybe, I don't know. And we have to have share in a fair way, and fair trade is very important. We don't know how to regulate. I mean, Twitter, they're hating each other, literally, and expressing it on Twitter. And what will happen when people defame each other? And this is important, an important debate. One last word from Urs Gasser.
So on the advertisement question, I would say, well, the experts who have figured it out are hosting this big tent, right? It's Google. Mm-hmm. And there is something, you asked about research and data points, 2 data points. If you talk to young people and do focus group interviews, they would tell you they hate ads. They don't like it at all. But interestingly enough, you still have extremely successful companies such as Google creating a lot of revenue out of ads. And I think the main reason is that Google and other companies have figured it out that it is not the advertisement as such, but the question what kind of advertisement you get that makes it valuable or makes it spam. And therefore, of course, all the data aggregation and so forth that happens in the background is used to make the ads more relevant, so that we don't perceive it as consumers necessarily as spam or something that bothers us, but helpful information to make informed choices about products or services or my next flight to Amsterdam or whatnot. So there I would rethink what are we talking about, what's the concept and notion of advertisement in the digital age. The video clip in front of YouTube may be a rather primitive, still TV broadcasting model-like type of advertisement, but I think we have much more sophisticated models today where you have consumer value added to it. Also personally, I also don't like ads too much.
için bazıları da katma değer sağlamıyor. Thank you very much for participating and sharing your opinion. At the start, we asked the question. Now we'll check the answer together. In whose hands lies the future of the internet? 27% said in the hands of technology companies. 73% said in the hands of users. So this is in line with what we have discussed during the panel. I will leave the floor to Rahasn Gulsan. This is the end of the panel. I have to wrap up.